Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and although you cannot see me, I'm here with Matt Kelly, the editor of Compliance Week, to visit this week for our podcast on the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I'm here with Matt at the Dow Jones Compliance Conference in Washington, where he's graciously consented to sit down and visit with us about the upcoming Compliance Week 2014 conference, which will be held in Washington at the end of May. Next month here. And Matt, I'm really thrilled that you could take the time to visit with us to tell the folks about the upcoming Compliance Week 2014. Thanks a lot for visiting with us.
Thank you, Tom. It's good to see you again. Happy to be here.
Yes, really excited to be a part of Compliance Week 2014. As usual, you've got a great series of speakers and panelists, and also vendors and sponsors that I'd also like to visit with you about. But I've noted some of the speakers you have, starting off with really the first day, right out of the bat, you have Kara Stein, the SEC Commissioner.
Yes.
I think on the first day, and why don't you just tell us about some of the keynote speakers you have?
You know, I'm really excited about them this year. Generally, our keynotes are very strong, but there's a certain ebb and flow and luck of the draw, and we really lucked out this year with some great keynote speakers. To your point, Kara Stein, who's the newest SEC Commissioner and a Democratic appointee, she's going to talk Monday morning and sort of open the event for us. I'm not exactly sure yet what Kara wants to discuss there, but I know, I've got some key themes that I'd like her to discuss, such as cybersecurity risks and where that should sit in a compliance officer's list of priorities. She has spoken about that in the past. I assume she'll probably talk about that again. Another favorite of mine, and probably on the minds of compliance officers these days, is conflict minerals disclosure and the idea of social policy coming home to roost by way of corporate disclosure. And whether or not that really is the wisest way to do this. I know there are plenty of people who would love to get conflict minerals out of their supply chain, but do not necessarily love this sort of a rule in an SEC filing to achieve what is a very laudable corporate or laudable public goal. So she's one. We will have Jay Jorgensen, who is the 1 year and 3 months global compliance chief at Walmart. He'll be talking on Monday as well about how he restructured compliance, Walmart's compliance function, and he had a dramatic reshaping he had to do. So he had a lot of organizational challenges. He had a lot of, I suspect, culture challenges to impose on Walmart, and he's going to talk about that. And I also want to get him to talk about how do you do those things, which are enormously difficult tasks, while at the same time you have a day job running compliance at the largest business in the world, which is a very public FCPA investigation that is still ongoing, and lots of distractions on a daily basis, while you have this long-term reform you're trying to impose. I think a lot of compliance officers could sympathize with that. We have the enforcement director of the SEC, Andrew Serezny.
Right. He
will be speaking. We will have a panel on Tuesday morning about the future of the audit committee, who are the bosses of probably most people listening to this podcast. And we want to talk about how the audit committee is overburdened and how they are so overscheduled and overcrowded with their duties that can they still give good guidance to compliance executives to implement a compliance program? And how can CCOs work better with the audit committee to help them do their job as well in sort of a virtuous circle. And then on Wednesday, we're doing something a bit different with Compliance Week's annual conference on Wednesday, is we're going to have only one track of 3 consecutive keynote speakers. The first person will be Peter Swire, who may not be known to too many people in the broad public, but Peter is a law professor from Georgia Tech, who is a privacy expert and was head of the President's Advisory Committee after the NSA eavesdropping scandal broke. We all might remember that back in, I think, December it was, there was a special committee the President had appointed to make recommendations on reform of NSA eavesdropping. Peter Swire was one of the leaders of that committee. So he'll be talking about how we can have this very perfectly understandable national security concern that the government has to address. How can that need be balanced with corporate privacy, privacy rules, consumer fears about who is accessing my data? These are a lot of different elements that each have an arguable position that what they are doing is right, and how do you ease that tension? Peter's going to talk about that. After him, we will have 2 back-to-back keynote sessions about whistleblowing. The first being more about the state of whistleblowing activity today and how you can cultivate a speak-up culture. And then we're going to close with another keynote more about looking back at the year of the whistleblower, is what we're calling it, and certainly with the SEC issuing these very large whistleblower rewards now, that really changes the calculus of how compliance officers work with whistleblowers, how important it is to protect them. What does this mean for compliance officers in the future? Because there are only going to be more whistleblowers and more whistleblower bounties and rewards. So that's it at a high level on the keynoters. So I think really are a nice crown jewel. And if I can take 2 more minutes.
Absolutely.
You know, the other really nice thing about the conference, the heart of it, is these panel sessions we have on, you name it, we will have it there. We will talk about risk management, we'll talk about conflict minerals, we'll talk about supply chains, we will talk about internal control systems, panel sessions of chief compliance officers, not just the big 4 audit firms, not just the big legal partners, not the consulting firms. They will be there too. They have very good points to make, and I do love all of these people equally, but the compliance officers are really going to be there talking about, here is what we have learned. Here is what we have learned works well. Here is what we learned the hard way does not work well. And a lot of these tales from the front line, a lot of peer discussion, a lot of networking, a lot of questions and answers from other compliance executives who are grappling with the exact same problems. And that is the solid majority of what we do at the conference, and so that's what will be on the agenda this year.
There's a couple of things that you do personally that I think make Compliance Week unique, and they seem small, but for me they, like I said, really do make it unique, and I'd like to ask you about those.
Sure.
And they struck me the first time I went, and they've continued to stay with me, and it struck me the first day, the first presentation, and it's really with the keynote speaker when you sit down with them for the informal Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who've not been to Compliance Week, the keynote speaker will make formal remarks from a dais, as you might expect. They may walk around, or they may stand behind a dais with giving a speech. Barney Frank, I don't think, had a speech, and if he did, he never looked at his notes. He just talked. But nevertheless, then you take the speaker and sit at a couch or other less formal setting and take some questions from the audience. You have some questions, but it really gets the speaker to open up. And I think it was Lanny Brewer was the speaker, but you really got him to give some information that was very significant to me in how I could communicate to compliance practitioners what the expectations of the Department of Justice were. And it was informal. Mm-hmm. It was not scripted. Yes, it was off the record. Yes, it was Lanny Brewer's personal opinion. But he was number 2 in the Department of Justice.
Yep.
And he was saying, it may have been from the heart even. Nevertheless, it was important. And that's not something I see at any other compliance event anywhere. How is it you're able to get those people comfortable to make those kinds of, I don't want to say pronouncements, but even to give that kind of information out? And you've got ex-generals to do it. You've got CEOs of Blue Jet to do it. I mean, you've got the gamut comfortable to talk. How do you do that?
I try to be really dumb and hope they let their defenses down. So my professional background was long before I got into compliance writing specifically. I was a news reporter at the typical small little podunk dailies in small town America. And that certainly helps build a rapport in learning how to ask good questions. But I think, getting back to talking about compliance executives and telling their stories in very practical, real terms. Along similar lines, I just try and keep in mind we are, in fact, all just normal human beings. And most people, when you get up close and you have a nice opportunity to talk to them, it won't take too long for them to I don't want to say let the defenses down, but let the formal mask down. I think actually most people like to be not on 24 hours a day, like a federal prosecutor or like a ex-general. It does amaze me sometimes the things that these people will casually mention. Another great example was Barney Frank of the Dodd-Frank Act fame, where I asked him about exemptions for small companies of Section 404 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, where he casually mentions, like, oh yeah, we're going to exempt them from 404B in the audit attestation, and then moved on. I just couldn't believe that he would be so breezy about it. And I think that also a lot of these speakers, they want to show that they are not the boogeymen. That's particularly the regulators. I mean, in some respects, they are going to have to be the boogeymen, but if they only look mean and cruel all the time, nobody is going to want to approach them or work with them or deal with them. And I think that given the complexity of some of these cases, they are feeling their way along as much as compliance executives are, and they want to have good working relationships. They want people to feel that they can approach these guys with questions. So I think that they like it.
The other thing you do at Compliance Week, in addition to the keynote sessions, you have things called conversations.
Yes.
And these are much more intimate gatherings where the rules are as follows. Everything that's said in the room stays in the room.
Yep.
And you can say or ask anything.
Yes.
And you've allowed me to lead a couple of these on the FCPA. And I've found the conversations really just fascinating because the participants really open up about what are their concerns today. Mm-hmm. So, and I assume they're not only about anti-corruption, they're about export control, they're about money laundering, they're about a wide variety of concerns.
They are, and that was something that we implemented, I want to say maybe in 2008 or 2009. They've been wildly popular, and it does let the group of maybe 15 or 20 compliance executives who really, really care about issue X get together and talk about it. We have a very diverse audience, we have a very diverse agenda, so we have roughly 400 people who care about several big things quite a lot, and then each of them care about several smaller things much less. And there's a tiny, tiny focus group who might really care about export control, or dealing with money laundering sanctions in Russia, or dealing with ethics training and specifically how you root out the mistakes in your ethics training for middle management or overseas employees. We've had examples like that. To your point, they are entirely off the record. I generally don't even attend them myself. The one I did attend once years ago, I actually heard somebody confess that he had a felony he was trying to figure out how to report. It gets that frank and open sometimes. And they're very worthwhile, very relaxed executive forums, and it lets them meet each other, and they like to meet each other. And I think that it isn't a huge community, so it's nice to be a sort of a touchstone for compliance officers to see each other once a year and shoot the breeze and keep up on what they're each doing.
One thing I don't think the attendees really think about or focus on at Compliance Week are your sponsors and vendors who attend. And once again, for those who have never been, the setup at the Mayflower is a long hallway where they can meet these vendors and sponsors who are very much a part of the compliance solution.
Yes.
And yes, I understand they are there to sell their product or service, but they're also there to communicate information. And you can get some very good information. So can you talk about how they can contribute to the compliance solution?
Sure. I think a lot of our sponsors, people like to roll their eyes that the big four audit firms and the law partners are just there to rack up billable hours. It's the only reason they talk to you. That is their financial incentive, yes, but they are very smart people, and they like to think about these issues and come up with good answers as much as compliance officers do. A lot of them do it for the love of the game, and by coincidence they can also rack up some billable hours. There's nothing wrong with that, but they are very informative people. They keep very good tabs on a lot of other compliance problems at other companies, and I'm sure they keep confidences very much, but they have a very good sense of what is going on broadly. And they also, when you think about the sort of products and services they sell, a major software vendor like Oracle or Hewlett-Packard is not going to close a $3 million software deal at the Compliance Week conference where they're going to give you the hard sell right away. They are there more to show that they do know what they are doing. They have things that they can give you, and they understand the sales cycle is long. The only way they're going to close that deal is to demonstrate that they know what they're talking about. And that's what they tend to do at this conference. So, I mean, it's good value for your money because you're not really, you are not paying for their services there. And I think that they're very sharp people.
I would like to pick up on one point that you suggested, which is I've found a lot of these vendors will communicate to show they know what they're talking about by presenting you with white papers or other information, which does communicate that. And it's really solid information that you can implement or at least assess your compliance program by their benchmarking that they've done in terms of white papers or sometimes even or longer papers that they put together, sometimes under the sponsorship of Compliance Week. Mm-hmm. So it's a great resource for the compliance practitioner to pick up while they're at Compliance Week. So if I would just say, if you haven't signed up for Compliance Week 2014, I hope you will take the opportunity to do so. I've attended several. I've always found them wonderful resources, and we haven't even talked about the networking and how you can benchmark your own compliance program and meet other compliance professionals. There's nothing wrong with getting your name out there. That's mm-hmm. part of the game that you need to play. And if you need to meet a wide variety of compliance practitioners to find out about what other companies are doing, I can think of no better place than the Mayflower the week before Memorial Day in May in Washington, D.C.
The weather is generally very nice and cooperative with us.
And it's before the tourists get to Washington.
Yep.
So with that, I'd like to turn the subject to Compliance Week.
Sure.
And is anything in the offing that you could tell us about or that Compliance Week is thinking about doing, or new initiatives you might be coming up with?
A few things. One that is not necessarily a brand new initiative. We started this last year, but for all of the European people who may be listening,
Excellent.
We do now have a European compliance conference
mm-hmm.
that happens every October, and generally it is in Brussels. It will be in Brussels again this year. It is a little bit smaller. Compliance is a smaller community and it is a little less mature than in the United States, but we had a very good first Europe conference last year with about 130 people. We will definitely be doing more there. At the conference itself, the U.S. conference in Washington, we will be presenting two different research reports. One with Kroll that is looking at anti-bribery practices and anti-corruption programs. And in fact, that in particular is interesting because we've done this now with Kroll for 2 years in a row, and this is the first time we've also pushed survey people to tell us what types of corruption are we talking about. Everybody, when they think corruption, they think FCPA and they think bribery, but what else are compliance officers charged with worrying about? Is it bid rigging? Is it price fixing? Is it money laundering? And what qualifies as corruption? Also, Deloitte, we will be doing a separate report there that is a bit more broader in focus, the Compliance Trends Report. That's going to look at more enterprise compliance programs generally. How big are they? How do they work? Reporting relationships. It's going to be much more than corruption, which the Kroll Corruption Report will be a deep dive into that specific subject. The Deloitte report is going to look much more broadly at what is a normal quote-unquote compliance program look like these days. So we've got that. We will be launching a new website as well. That will be coming hopefully in July. We have it in development. It will include some very new, I think very cool features for corporate subscribers of Compliance Week, where your whole compliance team might be subscribers. They will each be able to notice interesting articles and pin them to their personal filing cabinet and share them with the rest of their compliance team members. The new website will look much more interactive. We will finally have color photos. The reason why we only have black and white photos in Compliance Week right now is because when we launched in 2003, color photos, for digital color photos, were still a little bit sketchy and not necessarily sharp, and it took us a long while to finally get the right opportunity for a new website that's going to be it won't be a lot of glam, it's still going to be a lot of substance, but it'll have a different look, it'll have a new feel, and it will be more photos finally, and they will be in color, and we're very excited about that. It should be by, I would say, mid to late July that you'll see that. We'll have some sneak previews at the annual conference, actually, but then the big bang will happen shortly after the 4th of July.
Well, excellent. Some big comings and goings coming up for Compliance Week, but I'm looking forward to Compliance Week 2014. And once again, if you haven't signed up, I hope you go to complianceweek.com and we'll take a look at it, and we'll register for this year's conference. It should be the best ever.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot for coming on the program, and looking forward to seeing you there.
All right.